In today's video, we're going to look at operators and truthy, falsy statements. But before we can begin, we actually need to understand one quick concept, and that is Boolean. And the Boolean response, you may be familiar with numbers and strings and arrays and objects and those terms, but Boolean is a binary variable having two possible values called true and false. There you go. You can read it right here. It's that simple. It's simply just you have yes or no, true, false. Because our operators and truthy, falsy rely heavily on this concept of just true, false, yes or no. All right, so operators. Operators are simple actions you can take within a script. There are 5 types of operators. You have arithmetic, which is your addition, subtraction, multiplication, and so on. You have comparison and logical. And these both give you Boolean values, so true or false. You have assignment operators, which change the values of a variable. And lastly, you have ternary. Funny word, but that's what it's called. And this selects a value based on a Boolean argument. Now, if you're new to scripting, that sentence may have made no sense to you whatsoever, but we'll get there. So starting at the top, we're going to start with arithmetic. And this is stuff you have learned in school, so most of it will make sense. Our first example here, we have addition. We have our plus symbol. So 6 plus 2, it gives us 8. We can subtract. We can say 6 minus 2 gives us 4. 6 divided by 2 gives us 3. 6 times 2 gives us 12. And then this funny percent symbol being here doesn't actually give us a percent of any kind. So it's called modulus operator. And what it does is it is very similar to division. But instead of telling us how many times a number can go into another number, so 6 divided by 2, that means our answer is 3. That means 2 can go into 6 3 times. Well, modulus gives us whatever number's left over after that division happens. So if you do 6 divided by 2, there's no numbers left over. We just get 0. There's no remainder. So here are a couple examples. I'm actually about to spend way too much time on explaining a modulus to you right now, but it's probably a new concept to you. If it's not, please skip ahead. But here we go. Example 1. So we're going to take our 6 divided by 2. If you know division at all, you know that's 3. So 6 modulus 2 gives us 0. And here's one way to think about it is 6 minus 2 minus 2 minus 2 equals 0. There's nothing left over. And we don't go negative here, but we don't have to split that 2 into anything. So that's a pretty simple example. Let's make it a little more complicated. Let's take 7 divided by 2, which would give us 3.5 or 3.5. It gives us a decimal number. All right, well, what does modulus do with that? So 7 modulus 2 gives us the result 1. Well, that's weird. Why does it do that? Well, that's because 2 goes into 7 3 times, but that only gives us the number 6, and there's 1 left over. That's our remainder. And so the modulus gives us that remainder as a result. So it's 1. You can also think of it this way. So 2 plus 2 plus 2 gives us 6. So again, we can't go over the number. So we 7 minus 6 equals 1. All right, one more example. 20 divided by 6 would be 3.33333333. Sorry, it's late. 20 modulus 6 gives us the result 2. Again, it's weird. You're like, why does it give us these weird numbers? Well, again, that's because 6 goes into 20 3 times, because 3 times 6 is 18. But if you try, 6 cannot go into 20 any more times than that. And so instead of giving us a decimal, it says, all right, well, 6 goes into 20 3 times, giving us 18, but now there's 2 left over. And so that is our result, is that 2. Or you can look at it this way: is we started with 20, and we're just going to keep taking 6 out of 20 till we have a number that's not a decimal or negative. So 20 minus 6 equals 14. 14 minus 6 equals 8. 8 minus 6 equals 2. We just keep taking that 6 out until we can't take a whole 6 out. So there you go. That is modulus in a nutshell. I hope that made a little bit of sense to you, but we have to move on. So the next arithmetic operator we have are increment and decrement. And that is the plus plus and the minus minus symbol side by side. Now these two operators actually change the value of a defined value of a defined variable. So you couldn't do something like 6 plus plus because they change a value. So if it's not defined already, in this case it would be being defined, it wouldn't know it gives you an error. So it has to be defined. So we have 6. Now we say let's increment it, and increments by 1. So number plus plus equals 7. Well, now our number has changed to 7. So number minus minus, or decrement, back down to 6. And there you go. I will let you know that as you learn more about Google Apps Script, you may see things like this. You'll see the plus or the minus signs on the left side of the value, or the variable rather. And that does something slightly different. I'm actually not going to go over it in this video, but go Google it. It's interesting. Its use cases, in my experience, are few, but they exist and they will matter a lot when you need them. So moving on. We move on to comparison and logical. And again, these two types of operators, our comparison here, and logical operators, they will always give us a true or false response. They are a statement. We're going to say a statement. So let's start here. With 0 equals 0. Now, you may notice that we have 0, the number, and 0 as a string. And those are two different things. You can't necessarily add a word to a number. But this is going to return true. And this is kind of a one-off scenario, but I'm going to show you this anyway, just so you are aware that it exists. So we have what are called abstract comparisons. And that is, you'll notice you have your two equal signs, your double equal versus your triple equal sign here. And it's abstract versus strict. So abstract says, all right, well, this is 0, and this is kind of 0. It changes them to the same type of variable and then compares them and says, are these true? Well, yeah, they're both 0. Great. The strict does not change the type that they are. So it says the number 0. So let's say the statement, the number 0 is equal to the string 0. Well, that's false because they're not both the same thing. So the abstract lets us compare, or rather it lets us match just the value and doesn't take into account the type of thing that we are comparing. Now we move on. This is our equality statement, by the way. Now let's look at an inequality, and we want to say the statement, the number 0 is not equal to the string 0. But as we learned in our abstract option, or our abstract example up here, it's actually not true. It's a false thing because the number 0, according to the abstract rules, is equal to the string 0. But we're making a statement. We're making the opposite statement. Or rather, I'd call it a not statement. You can also say the number 0 is not equal to the string 0. Well, that's a true statement that we just made. So that'll give us true. So these ones here, specifically using our equals or not equals, can you compare not just numbers, but they can actually compare strings or words or arrays or objects. So we could say world equals, let's not use our abstract actually. And actually, before I keep going on at all, you really don't want to use the abstract. There are very few cases where they are necessary, and if you use them when they're not necessary, you may get some very unusual behavior that's going to be extremely difficult to track down. So whenever possible, avoid this. We actually want to try to use the strict version basically always. So keeping that in mind here, we're going to say world is equal to world. That would be true. So we're not using numbers anymore. We're using words. Or we can use numbers. Say 1, the number 1 is equal to the number 1. And that works. Or we could say the string world is not equal to the string number 0, which that's also true. If we were to say it's not, the string world is not equal to the string world, well, that's a false statement. All right, moving on. These next ones only apply to numbers. So 6 is less than 2, it's false. 6 is less than or equal to 2, also false. 6 is greater than 6, again, false. And you can change these numbers around, but again, you've probably learned these in math class, just these comparison statements. And then we have 6 is greater than or equal to 6. Well, that's true. So again, all these return true or false. Next one are logical. So we have our exclamation point, and this is a fun one because what it does is it takes a statement, one of your comparison statements, and it just changes it to the opposite of whatever it's supposed to be. So if 2 equals 2, that's a true statement, but if we put the exclamation point in front of it, it actually equals false. The next logical operator we have is the OR. So this I like to consider our optimistic operator because it's always looking for true. It wants things to be true when possible. So we have to give it 2 or more statements. You could actually do this or this, and you can keep going and make more statements based off this, but we're going to stick with 2. What this says is 2 equals 1. Well, that's false. Or 3 equals 3. And it wants to say, okay, well, if this is true or if this is true, then the whole thing is true. So in order to get it to return false, all of the statements have to be false. Again, it's an optimist, so it wants everything to be true. In this case, if 2 equals 1 is true, this is false. 3 equals 1, that's false. So this would actually give us a false response. If you keep adding things to it, and we don't need the parentheses, I was just using them just for clarification. If we say 1 equals 1, well, this is false, and this is false, but this is true. So our optimist is going to say, then the whole thing is true. We found one true statement, it's all true. The next one is the and this is the pessimist. This just assumes everything is false to begin with. And in order for it to return true, everything has to be true. So our same example down here, 2 equals 1, 3 equals 3. Well, up here, when we gave that example, it was true with the or, but for the and, the same statement, let's change this so it actually look the same, gives us false because this and this must both be true. So false and true equals false. If we change this 1 to a 2, so now 2 equals 2 and 3 equals 3, the whole thing is true. Hopefully that makes sense. But moving on, those are our logical operators. The next one is the assignment operators. And the assignment operators, they change the value of a variable. So looking at our variable called value, we have set the value to 10. Let's actually change that so it says 10 instead of 0. And you've actually seen this operator used over and over and over again. The equal sign, you can see in all of our examples here, equals, 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 equals. So you've already seen the assignment variable used repeatedly. And what it does is it sets a value. It changes the value. So, but it can do a little, we'll look at some other applications of it. So again, back to here. Let's say we want to add 100 to this 10. We don't want to change it to anything. We just want to say, hey, let's add 10 or add 100 to this 10. So we might write something like value equals value plus 100. And that's saying, okay, well, value equals whatever the value used to be plus 10. So this equals sign right here, this operator is saying we are changing the value. And it knows that value is 10, which gives us 110. Now, the next line after that, we can even change it from a number to a different type of value. So we've just taken our equals operator and changed it to a string called myString. But then the next line, we change it right back to a number. So we're just using this equals operator all over the place to do a lot of different things. And we can even combine it with our arithmetic. So up here you saw value equals value plus 100. But this is long and difficult to read, and honestly it can be a little difficult to understand at first. But when you write the same thing like this, it becomes a lot clearer and a lot more obvious what's happening. So this is doing the exact same thing as this, but in a simpler fashion. So now we're saying value equals value plus 2. Well, the value was 6. Now we're just adding 2. So we've just changed the value of this variable to 8. Now the new value is 8. So value equals value minus 2. That's a long way to say this, but we're saying value minus 2 equals 6. Value divided by 2 equals 3 because it was 6. Now it's 3. Now we're going to multiply that 3 times 2, which gives us 6. And then we're going to use our modulus. So 6 modulus 2, as we know from above, equals 0. And now you've just seen, like, you can do so much with these operators, and it makes things pretty simple. All right, now I'm going to go into something that's kind of a one-off. You may have noticed one little thing here at the top with our addition. So you see this plus symbol right here, and it adds numbers. You know how to use that in math. But you also saw it increment when you put it next to each other. It just went up by 1. But the plus symbol has one more special characteristic that it uses, kind of like a superpower, because it not only adds numbers, but it can add strings, so to speak, or even strings and numbers. So in this example, on line 86, we see our variable string equals hello. Now, just like we did value equals value plus 100, we're saying string equals string plus 2. But you can't add a string and a number. So what it does is, because we're using the addition symbol, it says, oh, you want to put those together. You want to concatenate them. And the result is hello 2. But we can take this a little bit further. We can actually do this with strings. So let's change this to world. If we did that, our output would be hello world. All one word, so there's no spaces. Well, let's say you want to add a word. And again, just to get like addition, instead of adding numbers, you're just adding words. It just keeps adding to one word. So let's add a space here. And this would give us hello world. Now, some of you may or may have not made a correlation up here, or may be wondering. So we used value equals value plus 100, which is the same format we're using here. But then we changed it up with this operator here. Turns out we can do the same thing with strings. So if we do string plus equals, now we can add to this string. Let's say hello world. This is a great place. And what this is going to output for us is going to say world, comma, this is a great place. And that's what this will do, because again, it just took our string and added this string to it. You just keep doing this. You can do string plus equals whatever, so on and so forth. So that's the superpower that the plus symbol has. If you try to do this with any other symbol, say use minus or divide or multiply, it's going to give you basically a undefined or not a number response. It's something you can't use. So moving on, the last operator we have is ternary. And the ternary operator is basically like a short form of the if statement. And it's often called short circuit. That's another way you may see it or hear it called or see it written. It's called short circuit. So what is it and how does it work? Well, it takes an argument, and it requires a true or false argument. And if it's true, and sorry, the syntax real quick before I get into that. Syntax is argument, question mark, what you want the thing response to be if it's true, colon, and the response if it is false. So here are two examples. We are creating a new value here, and we're saying, and giving it, and now we are saying if yes is not equal to no. Well, that's a true statement. If it is true, it's going to tell us apples, otherwise oranges. So in this example, it returns apples because yes is not equal to no. They're not the same thing. If you were to change this no to yes, yes is not equal to yes. Well, they actually are equal, so it would return oranges instead of apples. And now I'm going to get kind of into the next portion here. We can also, instead of using just straight true or false statements, and using our operators, our logical and comparison operators to create a true or false statement, we can use what's called truthy or falsy. So here I've put the number 0 with a question mark, and if true and if false. The number 0 returns false because it's falsy. It's not actually the word, it's not our Boolean response false, but it's falsy. And that's why it's called truthy falsy, because it's not actually true or actually false, but it's falsy. So here it will give us ternary falsy, our variable here is going to be me. So that leads us into truthy falsy, which is not super complicated. In fact, really you just need to know the falsy statements. So there are 6 things that can be falsy, or false in this case. First one is false. This is actually false, not even falsy, it just is false, but I'm throwing it in here as an example just to show you. The next one is undefined, and this is a real-world application of when you might get this undefined. If we have a variable here that is not defined. If you were to say equals something, now it's defined, and you wouldn't get that anymore. But if you were to put this thing 2 into that tertiary, if we were to say thing 2, yes, no, the response would be no, because this returns falsy. Moving on. Same thing with thing 3. And up top, I have defined an empty array, nothing in here. And for thing 3, I've tried to pull a value from our empty array using the 0 index. You can learn more about arrays in my array video. So check out the other videos on my page to learn more about arrays. But this returns null, which is different from undefined. It's simply saying where you're looking, nothing is there. And that's it. Whereas undefined saying nothing exists, this is saying nothing's there. Look somewhere else. Or rather, these aren't the droids you're looking for, is what it's saying. The next thing that returns falsy is just the number 0. As you notice in this example above, we can just put 0 and it returns me. If we were actually to change this to 1, all of a sudden this me would turn to you. Now this value becomes true. Next one is a blank string will return falsy. If you add, say, a 0 in here, well, now it's not a blank string anymore. It's a string that has something in it. So this would be truthy. Without it, it is falsy. The last one that returns falsy is NaN. And that stands for not a number. And there's several instances that may give this response. But here's a practical example. Is if you, like we saw up here, where if you can add strings to numbers, if you use the plus symbol, it'll just put them together, which would actually return truthy. But if you use a minus, multiplication, division, whatever, it's going to try to, in this example, it's going to try to multiply 2 by the string apple. Well, that doesn't work. You can't do it. So it returns not a number. And this result is falsy. Basically, anything other than these 6 things, undefined, null, blank string, not a number, the number 0, anything other than these is going to return true or truthy. Now, there are 2 things here, and I included them in this tutorial because you might expect them to return falsy, but they don't. And that is an empty array and an empty object. So if we define this array here, if we did our little ternary operator that you saw above, I said thing1, question mark, yes, otherwise, no. Actually, we have to give this a variable. Variable equals this. This variable is now going to be yes, because this returns truthy. Same thing with the empty object. So you may expect them to return falsy, but they don't. So remember that as you are learning your scripts. All right, that is all for this video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave them in the comments section below. And please share this video, or like my page, and I will see you next time.